This is the part of the season where perception fights reality. Where double-digit spreads dare you to look closer, where resumes are built on who you've beaten, and how badly you've lost. Tonight's slate isn't about comfort. It's about deciding whether pedigree outweighs scars, whether a heavyweight favorite can justify the number, or whether an underdog with nothing to lose can stretch a game far longer than the market expects. Every line you see here carries weight, and every result already on the board shapes what comes next. This is beyond the box score, and these matchups demand your full attention. Game 1, Wichita State vs. DePaul. This game opens with Wichita State favored by -5, and immediately the context matters. Wichita State enters at 6-4 overall, but that record doesn't tell the full story because at home, they are a perfect 5-0. That home dominance sets the stage against a DePaul team sitting at 7-3. A record that looks solid until you break down exactly where those losses came from and how they happened. DePaul's 3 losses paint a very specific picture. They lost to Buffalo by 13, Northwestern by 2, and most alarmingly, LSU by 33. That LSU loss stands out as a red flag, not just a loss, but a collapse, and it matters when evaluating how DePaul handles physical teams that can control the glass and dictate tempo. One of the biggest storylines entering this matchup is the status of Brandon Macklin. Macklin averages 24 minutes per game and has not played in almost 2 weeks, with his status listed as questionable. His availability, or lack thereof, directly affects DePaul's rotation, depth, and consistency, especially against a Wichita State team that thrives on structure and physicality. From a shooting standpoint, DePaul connects on 45% from the field, a respectable number on paper, but it's undermined by a massive rebounding disadvantage. DePaul ranks 200 ranking spots worse than Wichita State in rebounding, and that gap becomes critical when projecting second chance points, extended possessions, and defensive stops. Against a team that already protects its home floor, losing the rebounding battle compounds every missed shot. Wichita State's own losses deserve context. All 4 came by tight margins. Boise State by 3, St. Mary's by 5, Colorado State by 6, and Western Kentucky by 5. None were blowouts. None were collapses. Every loss stayed within single digits, reinforcing that Wichita State competes possession by possession, even when the result doesn't fall their way. When you combine Wichita State's 5-0 home record, DePaul's 200-spot rebounding gap, the uncertainty surrounding Brandon Macklin, and the nature of each team's losses, the spread begins to make sense. The lean in this matchup stays aligned with the number on the board, Wichita State -5, driven not by flash, but by consistency, rebounding control, and home court reliability. Game 2, Georgia vs. Cincinnati. This matchup comes with energy before the ball is even tipped. The game is set in downtown Atlanta at the Holiday Hoops Giving Festival, and Georgia enters as a -9.5 favorite with a total listed at over 158.5, while the expected total is stated at 165 to 166. From pace to scoring profiles, everything about this game suggests speed, pressure, and relentless possessions. Cincinnati arrives with a 6-3 record, but again, the losses reveal more than the wins. They fell to Louisville by 10, Eastern Michigan by 8, and Xavier by 5. Offensively, Cincinnati shoots 42% from the field, scores 75 points per game, and plays at a top 60 pace, which indicates they want to move, but efficiency has been a problem. They turn the ball over 14 times per game, and their offense ranks 311th, a glaring number when facing an elite defensive unit. Georgia enters this matchup at 8-1, with their only loss coming against Clemson by 3 on a neutral floor. Everything else about Georgia's profile screams control and dominance. They play at a top 10 pace, score 100 points per game, rank 4th in rebounding, and feature a defense ranked top 20. That combination, speed, scoring, rebounding, and defense, is what separates good teams from teams that overwhelm opponents in waves. The contrast between these two teams is stark. Cincinnati wants to run, but Georgia runs faster. Cincinnati scores 75 per game, while Georgia averages 100. Cincinnati struggles with turnovers at 14 per game, while Georgia's defensive pressure ranks among the nation's best. Cincinnati's offense sits at 311th, while Georgia controls games with rebounding dominance and transition efficiency. The betting angles reflect that imbalance. Georgia is favored by -9.5, the total sits at 158.5, and the expected total climbs higher to 165 to 166, aligning with Georgia's pace and scoring profile. The projected outcome reinforces that gap, with a predicted score of Georgia 98, Cincinnati 82, a margin that mirrors the spread and the underlying efficiency metrics on both sides. The spread lean follows the numbers as they are presented, Georgia -9.5, supported by scoring volume, rebounding superiority, defensive ranking, and home city energy in downtown Atlanta. Game 3, Cal State Northridge vs. Delaware. The line opens with Cal State Northridge plus 2.5, and immediately the betting angle leans aggressive with a CSUN moneyline suggestion. That alone tells you this isn't just about covering, it's about believing CSUN can win outright in this spot. Cal State Northridge enters with a 5-5 record, a perfectly balanced resume that includes a close 2-point win over Fresno State, along with additional wins against Troy and North Dakota. These aren't flashy victories, but they establish a team that can finish games and survive tight moments. Offensively, CSUN averages 77 points per game, and they do it with tempo, playing at a top 50 pace. That pace matters, especially when paired with experience. CSUN starts 4 seniors, a detail that often shows up late in games when decision-making and composure become everything. Delaware comes into this matchup with a 3-6 record, but the most eye-catching result on their resume is a recent road win at George Washington, where they won as a 22-point underdog. That result stands out because it proves Delaware is capable of springing a surprise, even when the odds are stacked heavily against them. However, consistency has been an issue, and their overall profile remains thin. A major factor on the Delaware side is the injury report. Jay Brown is listed as doubtful, and that designation matters for a team already averaging just 69 points per game. When offensive production is already limited, any absence or limitation becomes magnified, especially against a faster-paced opponent. The contrast between these teams becomes clearer when you line everything up. CSUN scores 77 points per game compared to Delaware's 69 points per game, plays at a top 50 pace, and leans on 4 senior starters. Delaware, despite the emotional boost of that 22-point underdog win at George Washington, enters shorthanded with Jay Brown doubtful and a losing overall record. With the spread sitting at CSUN plus 2.5, and the moneyline suggestion on CSUN, the lean stays firmly on Cal State Northridge to not just cover, but to push for the outright win. This is a matchup where pace, experience, and scoring edge quietly line up on one side, and the data doesn't flinch. Game 4, UNC Wilmington vs. Valparaiso. The second game on the slate carries a different tone, one of control, consistency, and a favorite that's earned its respect. UNC Wilmington -4.5 is the number, and the resume behind it is strong from top to bottom. UNC Wilmington enters at 9-1, with their only loss coming against Kent State by 9. Outside of that single blemish, they've been steady and reliable, including road wins at Radford and Louisiana, results that matter when evaluating travel, composure, and execution away from home. Statistically, UNCW checks nearly every box. They average 81 points per game, shoot 47% from the field, and dominate the possession battle by turning the ball over just 9 times per game, a figure that ranks top 25 nationally. Their rebounding also stands out, ranking top 50, while their pace sits in the bottom 75, a combination that signals control rather than chaos. This is a team that slows the game down, values every possession, and forces opponents to beat them in the half court. Valparaiso comes in with a 6-3 record, but their losses show a wide range of outcomes. They lost to Marquette by 3, to Southern Indiana by 8, and to Kentucky by a billion, a phrase that speaks less to precision and more to how overwhelming that matchup became. Offensively, Valpo averages 73 points per game and shoots 42% from the field, numbers that are respectable but noticeably below UNCW's efficiency and scoring output. When you stack the profiles side by side, the gaps become difficult to ignore. UNCW scores 81 points per game to Valpo's 73, shoots 47% to 42%, rebounds at a top 50 level, and protects the ball with 9 turnovers per game, backed by a top 25 turnover ranking. Valparaiso, meanwhile, has shown vulnerability against high-level competition and now faces a team that thrives on discipline and control. The expectation in this matchup is clearly stated with a predicted margin of UNCW winning by 10+. With the spread set at UNCW minus 4.5, that projected margin points toward a comfortable cover, driven by efficiency, rebounding, and possession dominance. The spread lean follows the structure and the numbers. UNC Wilmington minus 4.5, a team built to methodically pull away rather than survive late. Game 5, Memphis vs. Louisville. The number is loud right from the start, Memphis plus 16.5, with a moneyline of plus 1150. This is a spread built on respect for Louisville's resume and skepticism toward Memphis' inconsistency. But once you lay the data out piece by piece, the story becomes far more layered than the line suggests. Memphis enters at 4-4, a record shaped by close losses and one statement win. That win came against Baylor by 7, a result that immediately elevates their ceiling and proves this team can compete with high-level opposition when things click. The losses, while numerous, tell a story of narrow margins and pressure moments. Ole Miss by 6, UNLV by 14, Purdue by 9, and Wake Forest by 1. 3 of those 4 losses stayed within single digits, and even the 14-point loss to UNLV stands as the lone outlier in an otherwise competitive slate. Louisville counters with an 8-1 record, and their resume is built on credibility. Their only loss came on the road against Arkansas, while their wins carry weight: Cincinnati by 10, Indiana by 9, and Kentucky by 8. These are not soft edges. These are measured wins against recognizable opponents, and they're the reason Louisville is laying more than 16 points in this matchup. But that's where the tension lives. Memphis has already shown the ability to beat a team like Baylor by 7 and stay within 1 point of Wake Forest and 6 points of Ole Miss. Louisville has shown the ability to win, but not necessarily to bury opponents beyond recognition. With the spread sitting at plus 16.5, the margin invites a question about game script. Not who wins, but how far it stretches. The betting posture reflects that uncertainty. The moneyline at plus 1150 exists. For a reason, but the primary focus stays on the spread. The lean in this game aligns with Memphis plus 16.5, banking on competitiveness, resilience, and a track record of keeping games alive even when the final result goes the other way. Game 6, Villanova vs. Pitt. This matchup carries a very different rhythm. Villanova minus 9.5 enters as the defining number, and the statistical profiles on both sides explain why. Villanova stands at 7-2, with 2 losses that sit on opposite ends of the spectrum, a 5-point loss to BYU and a 28-point loss to Michigan. Outside of that Michigan blowout, Villanova's body of work leans toward control and efficiency. Offensively, they average 81 points per game, shoot 47% from the field, and knock down 11 three-pointers per game. Those numbers reflect spacing, shot quality, and the ability to stretch a defense beyond its comfort zone. Pitt enters at 5-5, and their losses paint a picture of vulnerability against a variety of styles. They've fallen to West Virginia by 22, UCF by 10, Quinnipiac by 8, Texas A&M by 8, and Hofstra by 7. None of those games ended in Pitt's favor, and several of them slipped away by margins that matter when evaluating their ability to stay inside a number like plus 9.5. From a statistical standpoint, Pitt averages 72 points per game, shoots 44%, and plays at the 20th slowest pace in the country. That pace suggests a deliberate, grinding style, one that limits possessions but also leaves little margin for error when facing an efficient offense. Villanova's profile directly challenges that approach. With 81 points per game, 47% shooting, and 11 threes made per game, they force opponents to defend the entire floor. Against a team that plays slow and has absorbed losses by 22, 10, 8, 8, and 7, that spacing and shot volume become magnified over 40 minutes. The spread reflects those contrasts. Villanova minus 9.5 asks whether Pitt can slow the game enough to survive, or whether Villanova's efficiency breaks the structure open. The lean follows the numbers as they stand. Villanova minus 9.5, supported by scoring gap, shooting efficiency, and perimeter volume. Big spreads don't exist by accident, but neither do covers. Every number here is earned through past results, through margins that linger long after the final buzzer. Memphis carries the scars of close losses and the confidence of a 7-point win over Baylor. Villanova brings efficiency, spacing, and consistency into a matchup against a team that's struggled to stay upright under pressure. Game 7, Richmond vs. Southern Illinois. The line opens with Richmond minus 4.5, and right away this matchup becomes a conversation about reliability versus volatility. Southern Illinois enters with a 6-4 record, but away from home, the profile shifts sharply. Sioux is 1-3 on the road, and those road struggles matter when stepping into a matchup against one of the most consistent teams on the board. Southern Illinois' losses outline their vulnerability. They fell to Nevada by 5, Memphis by 16, and North Dakota State by 7. Those margins show two different versions of Sioux, competitive in stretches but also susceptible to separation. Their wins tell a similar story in reverse, a narrow 2-point win over High Point and a dominant 29-point win over UT Martin. The range is wide, and that inconsistency is something bettors have to respect. From an efficiency standpoint, Sioux shoots 49% from the field, a strong number that keeps them alive offensively. However, their perimeter volume is limited, making just 4.5 three-pointers per game, which becomes critical when facing a team that can stretch the floor and accelerate scoring runs. Richmond enters this matchup at 8-1, and their resume is anchored by steadiness. Their only loss came against Furman by 1, a razor-thin margin that reinforces how rarely they slip. Offensively, Richmond averages 85 points per game, a number that immediately jumps off the page, especially when paired with perimeter production. Richmond knocks down 9 three-pointers per game, exactly double SIU's output, and that gap defines the geometry of this matchup. What truly separates Richmond in this spot is how they've performed against the number. Richmond has covered in every win except one, and even in that lone exception, the win margin was just 4, barely missing coverage. That detail matters. It speaks to how accurately the market has struggled to keep up with Richmond's consistency, pace, and scoring balance. When you stack everything together, Richmond's 8-1 record, 85 points per game, 9 threes made per game, and an elite cover profile, against Southern Illinois' 1-3 road record, mixed margins, and lower three-point volume, the spread starts to feel earned rather than inflated. The lean in this matchup follows the data cleanly and directly, Richmond minus 4.5. Now it's time for almost leans. Not every edge is ready to fire, but some numbers stay on the radar. Michigan State at Penn State minus 12 sits in the lean category, with attention tied to potential movement rather than commitment. NEU at Elon remains a watch list matchup, without a defined trigger yet. Manhattan at Fordham draws interest with the spread listed at Manhattan plus 9.5, a number that stays logged as a potential value point. There's also a conditional note worth respecting. Consider if line drops to 9, a reminder that timing can matter as much as the matchup itself. Before you lock anything in, remember this: the loudest plays aren't always the smartest ones. The real edge lives in the margins, in the rebounding gaps, the cover trends, the road splits, the quiet injuries, and the numbers most people scroll past. If you watched this breakdown all the way through, you're not betting headlines, you're betting structure. Stay patient, respect the data, let the market come to you, and when the ball tips, trust the work. This is Beyond the Box Score. We don't chase lines, we read them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. See you in next video.